Welcome to the Embodiment podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with embodiment specialists from around the world. I'm your host, Mark Walsh. So today I'm joined by Allison and Nick Jankel. So Allison and Nick founded something called Switch On. They work in leadership. They've had all sorts of interesting clients from Number 10, Downing Street to Nike, the NHS, also personal growth. Come from a mixed background themselves, then maybe they'll tell you more about it. So for example, Allison's done dance and gymnastics, and Nick's done all kinds of coaching work. The people I've known for a year or two. They do interesting stuff. So I'm looking forward to this. Guys, welcome.
Hi.
Thank you, Mark.
And as I understand it, you're just up the road near Lewes in the UK today.
That's right.
Yes, we are.
Deep in the rural lands of East Sussex.
And let's dive in. So how did you get interested in the body? What was your gateway into that?
Well, we both come from literally the polar opposite directions, and we met in the very similar place in the middle. It took us about 20 years each to walk to that place, to that field. So I came from a very cerebral background. My father's an academic, mother's a therapist, wanted to be a psychiatrist, so I went to study medicine, did science, maths, and was utterly terrible at sport. I was the fat kid at school with 4 eyes, thick NHS sunglasses. For non-English listeners, that means the free ones you get on like Medicaid. And so I really didn't have a relationship with my body. In fact, the relationship was just pain. I was the last kid to finish, the cross-country racing. I was literally the last guy every year. And so for me, my body was a mixture of shame, pain, and trauma. And I escaped into my mind, into being smart, which was one of my patterns of protection and feeling good about myself. And then a number of things happened in my sort of mid to late teens that really shook me awake into this amazing thing that happens beneath your neck. Or even around your head and beneath your neck. One of them was discovering the rave scene in the UK and the capacity of my body to actually move. Even though I was very overweight, I still had a natural capacity to move. And that was like, wow, this thing's amazing, but I've never been told how to use this thing. And I don't have to do running to move. Very quickly, a year after, I spent a year in Zimbabwe, which is very topical right now and very close to my heart. And I spent a year in the bush of Zimbabwe, so out in the middle of nowhere. And I met a lot of particularly women who were very encouraging of me just to feel into the music and dance and get out of my head, actually. And then about a year after that, I was diagnosed with something called fibromyalgia or chronic pain syndrome, which is becoming more well known, which I say, technically I probably still have, but I'm more or less symptom free. And that was the big awakening. That was like, wow, hello, lots of pain every day, agonizing pain, like stab myself with knives trying to get the pain out type pain. And that was the big sort of, hello, there's this thing called a body and you haven't been taking care of it and you haven't been loving it. This is like 25 years of hindsight and wisdom later. And that kicked me on a real journey into my what we call now called the body mind. It involved me leaving medical school and going deeper and deeper into myself. So that was my it was an awakening, a bit of pleasure from the dance and a lot of pain.
Okay, and Allison, your story is pretty different, right?
Very different story. So when I was 10, I moved away from my parents to live and train with my coach as a gymnast. And so I was an elite gymnast. But what happened during those 10 years of training is I created this relationship that was to my body that was very critical and demanding. And this idea that there's something called perfection and some sort of linear scale that I was constantly striving for. So even though I had full sort of control over my body kinesthetically, my emotional relationship was quite damaging. So it wasn't until I started craniosacral and started learning how the body self-heals and what's really going on in there that I started shifting that relationship of just a lot of hatred for my body for not being perfect to loving it.
How old were you when you realized that your body and that you could do things with your body that other people couldn't?
I was really young.
This is in the USA, right? Just to give some context here.
Yeah, it was in the US.
And for Southern California. And for those that don't know gymnastics, I have a student who was a ex kind of child gymnast, very high level. It's pretty brutal training, right? It can involve very, very hardcore training and hormones sometimes, and it's really, really tough. I mean, to the point where I've seen gymnastics training, I thought, God, that's child abuse. It's really hardcore.
It is definitely.
So in a way, this is kind of perfect. You two have two of the stories which are very, very common. One is the sort of intellectual escape from the body, and the other one is what I'd call the athletic escape. And it's a really nice distinction you made there between you could control your body's movement kinesthetically, but not be in any way in touch with it. And I think the intellectual escape makes more common sense to people. And then there's addiction escapes and trauma escapes, that, and I say this not without any judgment or blame, because there's reasons why people might want to do these things. But the sort of athletic escape, I think, is less well understood, that one could be very athletic. I found dancers, for example, to be very difficult people to do embodiment with, because they can make all the shapes and have none of it.
Exactly.
It's actually something we've talked about at length, which is you can spot. So I come from the rave scene, the dance music scene, the party and festival scene, and that was really how I got fully into my body. And I spent, at one point I was spending 3 or 4 nights a week, 7 or 8 hours dancing for years. So that was really, a lot of movement for a man who could barely run, and who had a lot of pain. Yeah. One thing, what you notice on the dance floor, people who are very controlling in what you call the athletic escape with their body, because they're very unfree and unloose and unflowing. Whether they're classic dancer or a gymnast or an athlete, there's so much tension and control in the body that it can't actually breathe. It's like there's no breathing going on. There's no in and out, which is
you're really stuck in this right or wrong way of doing something. Versus I'm in the experience, I'm in the moment, and what am I learning in this moment? Two very different belief systems that took me quite a while to shift away from.
And you talked about perfectionism. I think this is a really, you've already opened up like 5 themes we could talk for an hour on, right? like perfectionism, I see that in the martial arts. I definitely see it in yoga. Like there's a right form and it's external to me, and I have to essentially berate, beat, twist myself into this form. And not only is that impossible, but it's creating a relationship with the body, which is essentially one of sort of disembodiment and abuse, right? This idea of perfection is not your friend. And, in business, we find that too, right? Like perfection is the enemy of often of kind of good. So it's, anything to say on perfectionism?
Oh my goodness. I think it's the ultimate belief system is that there's something right or wrong. There's something that is good and bad. And so as long as you're stuck in that dual way of thinking, it sets you on this linear path of there's always something better or something I'm not doing versus this is my experience and what am I learning? So you completely miss the opportunity of growth, of transformation,
of presence, actually, isn't it? So as you think, as you talked about it, Mark, my sense that this dissociation from the body when you're a body perfectionist, whether it's yoga or tight abs or whatever it is it breaks the experience of being inside, feeling it, going out into the world, and it almost feels like there's a video or a camera now. And everyone's always thinking, what do I look like? How did I land? How was that shape right? And it becomes utterly externalized in the moment. It sort of breaks the connectivity inside. And it becomes basically an aesthetic thing around how am I going to be loved? Yeah, the performance body, I call it. Body, is this, if I pull this move with these lycra pants in this thing, with my tight, I call this stuff tight butt spirituality.
I was dancing Fire Rhythms on Wednesday night, and there's normally a few people who are new to it, and often there'll be kind of young girls from a dance or yoga background, and they'll come, and they, they're sort of classically very beautiful, and they just can't let go. And you just look at them, they look plastic compared to the people that have been dancing a little while, who are in their bodies and they're free. And as you say, they're breathing and they're moving. And, it's so, as a man, it shows up completely differently in my own body as well. It's like, wow, this is a woman who's alive versus here's a cardboard cutout or an Instagram photo that's been made 3D,
Right.
I wonder if that culture of how you look, and again, I say this without judgment because that's a hell of a culture particularly for women to come into. How do you look? Got to look perfect. What's the picture for social media? That is profoundly disassociative, right?
Totally. It's outside in versus inside out. And I went on that journey myself. And I remember my first 5 Rhythms class because I'm sitting there doing full on choreography. And I thought, and I'm like, I look very different from everybody else in the room. What's going on? What are they doing? Like it was so obvious, but I couldn't make the link to just come in and then move from a very different place. So again, moving from the inside out instead of these are my beautiful shapes and here's all my training.
It's quite a shock sometimes to people. I've seen people come in and they're like, I've spent years getting really, really good and really, really beautiful. And I can immediately tell, despite the fact that I look better, I'm actually worse at this than everyone else. And it's not like anyone's judging, but it's just really obvious to them and everyone else. And it's a real shock because they're really, they have spent years being invested. And it's like, no, I can do body. And it's like, yeah, you're doing it. You're not doing it. That's the point, exactly. Right?
Yeah, you just look very awkward.
Let's talk more about raving, because we've had people on here that talked about movement medicine and Fire Rhythms, but no one's actually talked about raving. And
what?
Yeah, right. Well, maybe it's a generational thing. So for those that don't know, in Britain in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a scene where people got together, usually in the countryside. It was often quite, people getting together last minute and driving in cars. There was sort of a semi-legal, and people would get together often with the help of quite a lot of acid or ecstasy and dance crazily all night. And it very much was a sort of precursor, I think. I wonder if that didn't warm up a whole generation to the idea of conscious dance. And I've heard people, for example, when we had Jamie Catto on, from bands or like musicians, say there was something transcendent that would often happen in these kind of rave scenes that no one really had a framework for or a model for. It was just something that people were doing and feeling. And I wonder if that didn't reopen the kind of, so we had the emergent scene in the 60s of the body, and then it kind of went away a bit in the 70s and 80s, and it came back in the 90s. And I wonder if that wasn't part of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been very influential for me. And it's actually something that when the first night we met, which was at a conference in California at Google called Wisdom 2.0, was the first of those conferences. And that was the first thing we talked about. And Ali, who comes from Southern California and was a good, in quotes, gymnast, good girl, just was like totally not into my chat about consciousness and shamanism and ecstaticness and whatever.
It was more rave and drugs.
Yeah.
Rave and drugs, where I came from, was like bad.
Yeah.
Only the losers do that.
The high school dropouts. Whereas in the UK, it was the cool kids. So for me, the rave scene was very influential to me. Not just the field, the raves in the fields and the warehouses, but what it spawned in the 90s, the dance music culture. And I just done quite a bit of research on this for my new book, and there's a whole chapter on the eruption and suppression of ecstasy in culture. And so raving and dance music is basically an ecstatic experience. It's not the drug MDMA is called ecstasy for a reason, right? And it's extremely powerful, not just as an individual embodiment experience, but as a community embodiment experience, because you stop talking and you start being with people who are from different generations and cultures, classes. I mean, if I grew up going to a posh private school in London, and I'd never met most of the people that I was now meeting. I'd never talked to them, never met people who come from East London, black kids from East London, and it was just like, wow, we're like, let's talk, let's be together. But then it got suppressed, as most ecstatic experiences that have become anything like powerful gets suppressed by the government, by laws, by the moral majority. But I've done some research on this, and I've gone backwards. So I thought, wow, this was the big thing in the late 80s, early 90s. But as you say, there was another explosion in disco in the early 70s in a thing called Northern Soul in the UK. But before that, in the 50s, the dance halls were the big pursuit of the 50s.
It just keeps coming back, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Anyway, it keeps coming back.
Pop.
And it gets repressed, pops up elsewhere.
We need to move. We just need to find a way to move. And now we've got the 5 rhythms and the conscious dance scene that's kind of, or the morning rave scene, that whole dry raving, dry dancing. We just need to move. And there's a great quote. I can't remember who said it now, but never trust a man or woman who can't dance, basically. It's like I think it might even be Nietzsche.
There was a saying, never trust a man with a sword who can't dance as well. That's the sort of business version.
Oh dear. Never fight a man with a sword you can't dance. I love it.
So there's and obviously in the Scottish tradition there's the combination of those. But let me play devil's advocate here for a little bit then, because what I sometimes see either in a rave scene or with drugs or without it in kind of conscious dance is people, ecstasy, they get real high, whether that's chemically or through movement or through breath work. If we look at sort of some of the breath work modalities, and they kind of go into this ecstatic state, but then they come down and nothing's really changed. They haven't brought anything back to life. They haven't really brought anything back to the workplace or to their parenting. And it's just this massive experience. And this is quite personal for me, actually. I'm going to share something personal. I had a cousin that was very into the rave scene and did a lot of drugs and actually ended up just depressed and killing himself, and it was, I think it's because he'd experienced a lot of ecstasy, both literally and figuratively, and then came down from that. And he was a surveyor, and he was just like, I'm a surveyor in Guildford.
Wow.
How do I deal with, I've just seen God and now I'm down the pub with my mates,
Totally get it.
It's like, so I want to play devil's advocate a little bit here in terms of like ecstasy not being the only show, or what's limiting in that.
Yeah.
I'll say my bit. I think that is the bit, is how you take that experience, and then do you have the tools and practices to then integrate that into your personality, into your day-to-day relationships and your life. And I think that's kind of unfortunate that there isn't sort of a holding. Of course, you can create it on your own, but a holding or just a knowing among the masses that you can use this for that transformation. If you know what to do, and people are holding you in that space.
And that's what I'd say, at least in the
so different.
At least say in the 5 rhythms community, there's a narrative around it. There's kind of elders in those communities. There's people, I often don't see a lot of integration even in that community into life, but at least there's a kind of a holding around it.
Some guardians, some holders. It would be amazing if people went in with that intention to release, and then to integrate all the wisdom that came into the personality. I think that's where it's at next.
You talked about athletic escape, intellectual escape. There's definitely ecstatic escape or shamanic escape. Happens in the ayahuasca scene, the medicine plant scene, flight to the stars, see God, infinity, realize I am everything. And then you come back, as you say, to Guildford, to, getting up at 6 a.m. in Hackney, getting the tube to work, dealing with the commute on the 405 in LA, whatever your gnarly reality is. We all have a gnarly reality. And the whole point of transformational work is that, although it may be easier to feel switched on, in Goa, in Ibiza, on a terrace, in the middle of Burning Man, the practice is, how do I feel this embodied, deeply sense that I am part of this world?
Yeah.
I just came back on the way to the podcast. I just dropped my older son at school. I was, obviously getting my mind into and body into the experience of what the podcast was going to be. And I realized as I was driving, I can feel deep in my experience, in my cells, the connection between me and the road, the trees, the rats surrounding the road. And that for me is embodied wisdom. It's feeling it at a felt sense level, pre-mind. This sense of continuity, of connection,
gratitude,
and then all the other things flow from it.
Yeah. I went for a stage of getting quite cynical about state experiences. Someone did mushrooms at 14, and I had a huge state opening. My first kind of sexual experiences at 16, and again, not really knowing what to do with those. And it wasn't until I stabilized through lots of meditation and martial arts that I had a context for those sort of things. And now if I have a sexual opening or do mushrooms, which I occasionally still do, it's there's a context for that. There's a holding for that. And I've come from being a little bit cynical of those practices. First of all, it was like this is the best thing ever, to being completely cynical about them, and now going, okay, well, they're state experiences, they maybe have their place, and if they arise, then that's okay. And it's I see this move around embodiment generally towards conscious parenting, being conscious business, and actually taking it into the kind of marketplace and the kind of nuts and bolts of life. Let's do a little bit more about this intellectual part, though. I feel like we went to the athletic side, but not so much your experience. So people really, respect the kind of academia still. Like on your website, it's like Cambridge graduate. And part of me, my class hatred kind of hates that. But I'll be honest. But another part of me goes, no, I get why he would say that, because on his website, because it's like, there's still that respect for that. And I think the universities are losing respect rapidly because of the kind of postmodern bent in them. But there's still, like in business, for example, there's a respect for researchers and academics. And there's a way in which we're still privileging the academic over the body, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
I went on my own long journey on intellectual. So I was, people thought I was going to be a doctor, and then I was going to do a PhD and all these things. And so I've actively chosen to be super practical in the world. I absolutely am amazingly grateful of my intellectual experience, because for two reasons, actually, and be very honest. One is because it allows me now to still read science papers about neurobiology, about affective, emotional psychology, and what's happening in the brain-mind connection, and I can understand them, and I can translate them for people. So that's really the gift it gave me. But then it has also given me credibility. So I have been on a couple of TV shows, and I just would never have, I don't have a psychology degree. I don't have a psychotherapy, whatever. So it's given me just enough credibility in the sort of, let's call it, in the 60s, the square world. It's given me just enough credibility as a square in the square world. Yeah. I can bring the circle or the sphere into it undercover, under the radar. And so that's why I put it on the website, because it allows me to get into places like Number 10 as a spiritual teacher. I mean, how many wisdom teachers get into Number 10 to do a talk? Yeah. Because I have this sort of intellectual veneer. I can do deeper stuff, maybe over time I'll, won't need it anymore.
People say, what's the most useful thing you learned from your psychology degree? I say, it's nothing useful that I learned, but it's real useful to have on the top of my CV when people go, so, honors, BSc honors psychology. It's like, okay, there's a door opener right there,
Right.
Exactly.
Alison, you have something on this?
System.
Allows you to get into the system. So this is maybe something that we've had quite a lot of fairly alternative people on the show. And I think maybe this is something we can talk about as people who work in the straight world. I was in a PR company in London yesterday, right? Like real straight, square. We're using some old school terms, so I hope people hear the inverted commas there. And I was like, wow, my first thinking was it's got a lot easier because they all knew what mindfulness was, right? I was like, that wouldn't have happened 10 years ago when I started my company. But there's still that, how do, getting past those barriers, how do you open the doors? I think we could have a good conversation about this that hasn't been on the show before.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we talk about is our work is, we're not countercultural, we're not against the culture, we're for the culture. We're for the culture to change. We don't want to sit out here dropping out. We want to bring this into the systems, education, criminal justice. This stuff, unless it gets into these systems, it just becomes a fringe and
something
lovely,
that happens on the outside.
Yeah. And
it creates more separation and division.
And there's an escape in that. There's the hippie escape. We know that from the 60s. So we, what's the word? We chart a very fine line, a creative tension, actively, literally every day, talking about it, between how much of the big chat we share and how we share it, and how much of the re-languaging and the re-grammar, a grammar that makes sense to people who are ultimately scared of whether it's ecstatic or meditative states or experiences. And so if we create more barriers for them by using funny language and new age tropes and branding and whatever. It just creates more fear, more space.
There's a lot of fear there, isn't there? And I had this sense yesterday of just people that I go, wow, actually you're being really brave even to be here. And it's these days I kind of respect it and go, wow, this is outside of your world and you're being brave. And you know what? If I need to put on a jacket, if I need to cut out, we call them unicorns, the hippie words. I wrote a book called Working in Business, A Guide for Hippies. And a lot of it's like about language use, words to cut out and ways to dress and ways to talk and mannerisms to cut out. It's just like, well, if they're being brave and I need to cut some stuff out to get to the really core, and I was doing, embodiment work, meditative work, really interesting stuff with them. But it's like the package, it's just polishing the package a little bit. And I think we're definitely in the time of integration. And there's actually a warning from history about this. The original hippies are actually in Germany in the 1920s and 30s, the Wandervogel. And they moved to California, interestingly. But a lot of them essentially were doing their hippie thing. They invented the youth hostel movement in the countryside, free love, long hair, the original hippies, really. And they were literally pre-fascist Germany. So because they were completely uninterested in changing society or integrating society, they completely escaped from it. Some moved to California, some just went into the countryside, and literally a fascist state came into being afterwards. And to me, that's like a really interesting case study from history of how you can have a group of really passionate, hippie kind of alternative people, and they can not change society in any way.
Right. That's brilliant. And that's
spiritual bypass.
Yes, it's spiritual bypassing. It's wedded to new age as an aesthetic rather than what's really going on inside here. And that's one of the things I'm super passionate about, because I'm a kind of quite urban, London-y, designer-y type guy. And often I can walk into these hippie environments, which is what I do, is some of the stuff that this stuff is about. And I can feel people judging me for being...
It goes the other way, right? Yeah.
It's the inverse judgment.
Like, seriously?
Exactly.
Taking listening to junk since I was a child,
Right. And you can be a venal, egotistical maniac and look like a total, biodiesel burning, hippie van driving character. And you can be super in your suit and whatever and be totally heartfelt, compassionate, love-based and whatever. So we've got to really make sure aesthetics don't get confused.
Yeah, just taking on the aesthetic and some tattoo or the clothing or whatever, which is very quick and easy to do. And I've met some really good people in business as well. Some really, this really surprised me. Like 10 years ago, I was like, well, I work in business because I need their money. But it's like, I kind of was like, oh, it's going to be awful. And actually, I've met, I'd probably say equal proportions of kind of good-hearted people in business as I have in martial arts or yoga or, any other scene I've been a part of.
Well, I mean, we've gone through this journey where we thought, should we just eventually drop the business stuff that we do, the leadership stuff, and just focus on really doing intense, transformational, love-based work? But I recently spent a 2-day workshop with 25 CEOs of one of the world's biggest banks. And I was doing conflict transformation through connection, through what I would call love, but I didn't use that word with them. I was doing empathy and purpose and what really finding who you really are in the world is. Now, that 1-2-day workshop could have a far larger systemic effect.
Yeah.
20 years of running workshops in the counterculture on the edges.
Yeah, in terms of impacting the world, and I'm kind of greedy in that way.
Me too.
I was working with a very, very big company. I did a session on them on meditation, a little bit of stuff. And then afterwards they said, hey, why don't you just hang around and watch our kind of meeting, kind of high level stuff just to get a better sense of us. I said, great. And in this meeting, they're talking about corporate social responsibility. They're talking about equality issues. They're talking about all these great stuff. And I was like, wow, do you normally talk about this stuff? And they were like, no, but today it kind of felt right. And I'm going,
that's great.
And these guys are having conversations like, should we close 25 factories in China?
Right.
High level conversations, should we employ or fire 1,000 people? And I'm going, wow, I think I just influenced that conversation a little bit. And that's affecting thousands of people in China tomorrow, and that's an impact I'm just not going to have at the Brighton Buddhist Center.
I think the days of compartmentalizing and wearing our work hat and our friend hat and our parent hat and all these different ways that we think is the way we're supposed to behave in that environment are over, and what we should talk about and what we shouldn't talk about and how we should behave. So there's more and more people like us who are coming in, because really they're the same. We're all the same, right?
Yeah, and then you'll find out the HR manager's been doing yoga for 10 years and she's quiet about it, but tells you in the break, you know?
Exactly.
It's like, I'm the one that got you in here. I do yoga, but don't tell anyone.
Right.
You know, like, that's often what happens.
And by being yourself, and this bringing you back to the body, by being the one body you are, or the body mind you are, not the 20 different versions, personalities, masks, brands. If you really inhabit this being and this thing, wherever you stand, wherever you speak, wherever you just sit and listen, it has an influence, it has an effect, and it gives permission for these people who I call them love curious. They're not really committed into this whole thing, but they're super into it, and there's lots of them. And this is like really, this is a big market for us in terms of from a business point of view. Love curious people, and you just give people permission to be more curious and to be more honest and to come into their bodies. Because when you really come into your body, then a lot of the answers are kind of there for you.
And there's still a phobia of the body in business, though, isn't there? You know, like yesterday I had people doing emotional intelligence work, centering work, meditative work. That was all fine. And right at the end, they've been really quite open and managed to win them over. And right at the end, they said, okay, let's just give each other a little massage before you go home. And like 3 people literally jumped. And I was like, oops, made a mistake, because they'd been so open to other stuff. And they looked like they were scared of being sued, or it was like this really like body phobic culture. And these are people who knew each other well, who had just had 3 hours of sort of deep work together. And I was like, wow, it's still there, that body phobia, huh?
And movement phobia in a meeting. And we've experienced that working together, is that, with suits, ultimately, people who are sort of smart. I have a tendency to avoid that because I just don't want to have those moments of disconnect and rapport break. Yeah. But you've had some pretty success with these.
I mean, the body doesn't lie, right? So it's like as soon as you have people go into the body, it's like this vulnerability comes out, and that's terrifying for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Especially if they've got their front and they've got their way of being, and suddenly they have to come into their body and do that. It's like, oh, no, thanks. So, but that's because, we aren't educated. We're not in a system, starting from when we're born, basically, about, we're already there when we come into the world, but how do we stay there? How do we stay in our bodies? And it's just not cultivated in our society, in our communities, in our schools.
Well, more than that, you're actually actively told to get out of your body from age 5 or 6. So we've got 2 kids, and one's 8 and one's 5. So they're very much in the early years of being entrained by school. And we've chosen schools that are relatively untraining into the mind. They're non-academic, non-homework schools. And even in these schools where they allow kids to fidget and to have movement and to have energy that needs to be moved around, they're still, even in this cutting-edge progressive schools, are still saying, get out of your body in this moment and come into your head and do this stuff for the next X amount of time. And then we spend, people like, the 3 of us then spend years trying to get people to come back into their body and to move more during the working day.
It's ironic. It's like one thing of culture is going one way, another thing's going the other. Yesterday I was like, do I still have a job, really? Why am I necessary? This is mental. There's that frustration with it. And Allison said as well, I think vulnerability is really the key issue when I work in business. It's the fear. It's a fear-based culture. Very often people are worried for their jobs, worried not to perform. And there's, they have a facade that they've built, and there's a vulnerability there. And again, that's why I can feel quite tender towards a lot of my business clients. And, I'm also glad that I don't work in that environment all the time, because it's nice to have groups who are just like, okay, you guys all get this. Let's just fucking go deep. Like you guys, I like the balance. I think it works to do both.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm. Yeah. When we do our sort of intense workshops with the people, who choose it for themselves. That's a big thing there as well, is who chooses it for you.
Yeah, versus somebody just coming into the office and they're like,
paid by the HR director or the CEO. You have permission to go as deep as you want to go. But even then, we still are super sensitive, because we are very much interested in the sort of mainstream. Mm-hmm. We're super sensitive to wording, languaging, instructions, exercises that might weird people out, or weird them out too much. Just like, oh, we lost them, and we don't
Gotta
want
be trust there, huh? And yesterday I was just like, immediately just went, I made a mistake, And it's like, because I thought this group are cool. I took my shoes off. They were cool with that. So they weren't the average London corporate. So I think I kind of went more into hippie mode and then realized like, oh, I went too far. But that's with any new client, there's a sort of feeling into it, like what's allowed, what isn't. And okay, so top tips of people out there who may be kind of like, I meet a lot of like dance people or yoga people or martial artists, and they want to work in business. And A, because of the money, that was my original motivator. And B, because, there might be some urge to sort of integrate and help the world and, work with powerful people. So they want to work with business. What are like your top tips for that?
Wow, that's a really good question.
We've already talked about language, right? Like,
I would say that's the
language
first.
is number one.
The language, the aesthetic, your whole thing.
Mm-hmm. So look at your aesthetic, look at your language, check that out. Like, get someone to, and people don't even know what are the jargon hippie words, right? Like, I had a yoga teacher that I taught, Jamie, and she'd learned yoga in California. And she got her like cynical Croatian businessman husband to sit at the back of her class and just raise his hand every time he didn't understand what she was saying. And he raised it like 30 times an hour.
Right.
And she was like, you don't know what that is? Like, she was blind to it and she had to like write down the words, so she's been in like a whole process of training herself out of it.
Yeah. And
we have a little bit of that too.
We do. I still have to
because
translate.
I'm from California. I think we've got our own language, our own lingo. And often he's like, no.
What Allison means is, I might say, I'm going to hold space for you. And I can see people don't know what that means. So then I'll then explain it in a really super normal way, which is I'm going to make sure it's safe for you to explore things that are challenging and not so you don't feel judged. And, oh, great, holding space. Oh, that sounds cool. And so that's the language. That's the first thing. I think I would say also something about really knowing who you are. And that's so trite as wisdom from wisdom teachers, which is the more you inhabit yourself and presence your own power without angst, without your trauma and all your either for or anti-business, big people, whatever. Like, so I used to have a big thing about investors. I used to have a whole pattern around people with lots of money. The more you work on that stuff and the more you inhabit your own version, your version of you, whether you're, where you come from, you will connect with people and you'll get work. If you try and pretend to be someone else or are acting out unconscious stuff that you're not even aware of yourself, that's going to be people. I'm amazed how flexible people can be. There's a guy who lives actually near us who's another leadership guy, and he's full dreads, with a suit, but he's full out there. And I'm like, people are okay with it as long as you're inhabiting your own self.
There's something about just having confidence to be like, hey, I really bring something to the party. Like, they wouldn't be getting me here if they could already do this. So the fact that I'm a bit weird is actually not a bad thing. And then there's the sort of shadow work. Like, I had to work a lot on my relationship to money, to wealth, and power. Most hippies are really repressing stuff around money, sex, and power. And it's the stuff around money and power which is going to get you in business, right? Like, that's the stuff that's people are going to immediately, like, I had this slight resentment towards wealthy people or powerful people, like kind of teenage stuff. And people smelt that and they didn't like it. And it's very different from people like yesterday going, no, this guy really has our interests at heart, and like, he might be a bit weird, but kind of like, he gets it. And I think the other thing is also just being really pragmatic, right? Like, the guys yesterday were like, you're giving us something we can use. That was what they're like, it's weird, it's uncomfortable, but we'll go there because we want to win. And if this looks like it can help us win, we're going to take it on board. And, and they were the most, like, I'd never seen such practical applications of technique. They immediately took it to like, okay, how can we use this in a sales meeting? How's this going to change our emails? I was like, it was impressive. I was like, wow, it's a hell of a real world application,
Yeah, I mean, something you said about there that to reflect back is that just love. You're in the business room or the government room or whatever organizational structure, you're there because you love the system, you love the world, and you love people in it. And if people feel that, then unbelievable things can happen. You can challenge them, you can cajole them, you can confront them, because they get that you're not here to judge. You're not here to tell them what they're doing is wrong. But it's a slippery slope. So I was asked to do a keynote next week, and the bureau, the people who call me up often to get me speaking gigs. They said, can you do it? They didn't tell me who the client was. I was like, yeah, it's fine. I can do Tuesday. So, and it's just so you know, get a sense of the value. It's $6,000 for a 1 hour talk. So the guys, can you speak to the client this afternoon about what you will talk about? And I was like, sure, of course. And he goes, yeah, it's JTI or something. And I was like, okay, what's that? So I look online, and it's the second largest tobacco company in the world.
Right, yeah.
Like, okay, interesting. So we had a little chat about it, because this is a active tension always. Are we sharing the love, or am I giving them powerful tools they can use to create more cancer?
Exactly.
So what am I doing here? So I spoke to the guy from the company. I said, I don't have a problem in principle with any industry. What I do, but I don't hold back anything I have to say about purpose and values and stuff. And then I let, to speak a little bit of hippie chat, I let the universe then decide where the fit is. And they didn't go forward to book me in the end.
Yeah.
So that way I was like, I'm happy to share about breakthroughs, about transformation, creativity, leadership, but I will share it from my love. I didn't say the word love, but I'll share it from my grounding.
And it's either a fit or it isn't.
Yeah, go on.
When you do know what you're offering, what you're being of service to, then there's either a fit or not.
Yeah, I have a line if I'm doing transactional versus transformational work as well. So if it's just like, hey, I'm going to make you more effective with some time management and stress management, I want to know what the client does, and I want to be able to do that. But if it's deep transformational kind of heart-based work, I'm like, okay, I don't really have to worry about that to the same degree.
Yeah.
Personally, I draw the line at arms manufacturers and tobacco companies, but like it also depends on the client. Like this PR company I'm like, okay, who do you do PR for? Yeah. What do you promote? And there's some sort of research into it. Making sure I'm not just giving kind of weapons to dangerous children,
Absolutely.
With deeper work, it almost doesn't matter who it is.
And the universe will take care of it. You say who you are. This is my transformational offer. And if they're looking for that, they'll be like, and it's brilliant. I mean, if they really wanted that transformational offer, then who better than you or us or any people to do it, right? Because it's fully grounded in purpose and love. But yeah, transactional upgrades. If it's about upgrades, then I really want to make sure it's a fully sustainable business.
Okay, before we move on to this copy, Alison, you reminded me of someone I think you're our first guest from California, and I really like you. And we also our biggest, I'm quite hard on California and America generally, but Northern California particularly, I'm quite hard on this show. And the Libsyn figures show that the biggest city that listens to this podcast is actually San Francisco, followed by Brighton, followed by London, followed by Moscow, followed by Sydney.
Wow. So I lived there for 10 years.
Just to all our Californian viewers, please do not be too upset by the Californian bashing. I love you, really. A little message to the listeners out there. So thank you for coming on and reminding me how nice Californians can be, Alison. Let's move on from this topic. So it's the business side of what you do. I mean, purpose is a big part of what you do too. What are you guys interested in? What is really buzzy for you right now you want to speak about that relates to the body?
Another good question. I mean, one of the things that we're really, really excited by at the moment is teaching people what they need to heal themselves. And that for us is probably like, if there's one thing that we could leave this world having made a dent in, would be not needing to rely on external people or products, whether they're prescription or non-prescription drugs, or psychotherapists or anyone else to heal yourself. Because it's just like with so much trauma.
It's just taking your power back, your power, your intuition, your wisdom, and really learning how to relate to the body mind's wisdom, how to listen to it, how to talk to it, exploring all the different tools like breath work and sound therapy and meditation and movement and using these things that are, it's who we are. It's what we have at our disposal. So, we are definitely passionate about people taking ownership of that.
We both shared a long pain journey. Allison from well, you have multiple stress fractures from gymnastics.
So many.
And me
injuries.
from fibromyalgia. And so part of our inspiration is, how do you get yourself out of pain? And because you can't be of service to the world. You can't be truly purposeful if you're caught up in your own physical and emotional wounding, partly because you'll become you'll bypass into saving the world without really knowing how to save it from yourself. But also, you just don't have the time and the energy if you're caught up in your own stuff. So that's very important to us. I mean, for me personally, I've just spent 2 years writing a book that, as someone who, I love science. I mean, I studied it, I've cut up bodies, I read it every week, and I love it. But it's always from the outside in. It's always, can only ever tell you what you can see and measure. And then I love inner work, whatever it is, whether it's ecstatic or very quiet, meditative stuff. And so I'm deeply passionate about, I really believe that science and spirituality are two ways of seeing the same reality. One comes from inside out, one comes from outside in. And so part of my life's work is to tell people that, to say, look, all you cynical science lovers who have sort of, because it's new age and whatever, you dismiss it and you laugh at it. And you might take something at Burning Man, but you don't really get into it. I'm like, guys, it's the same thing.
They dance together.
They dance together. They're not different worlds. They're just two different perspectives on the same one reality. Because I see so many smart people who are just in so much suffering because they don't get into their body and see the world from within. So that's a big area of passion for us. And then we're just about to start working on a new workshop and book about relationships, actually, as we work together and love together and live together and lead together.
Well, you're brave. You're brave. I've worked with my wife briefly, and we love each other, but choose not to work together.
We've gone through the many of those loops.
She translated for me when I was working in Moscow for a year, and said, I really enjoyed working with you, Mark. It's great to see what you do, and I'd never want to do it again.
We've had those conversations too. And we've been together 7 years, and the reason we haven't done a relationship thing yet is because we wanted to do it from a point where we're over 50% able to really be in empathy and compassion together.
Yeah. My wife and I
reached that.
My wife and I did a workshop on embodied attraction together, and then straight, gay, a few versions of it, and that was really great. And some people said, "Hey, can you do one on relationship?" And we were like, "Maybe in 10 years." Right. We want to really be in a place where we can, with integrity, do that.
Absolutely, and that's why we've only just started and go. You know what? I think we have something to offer now. From a place of integrity.
Yeah, we're just getting there. And we go deep daily. All our stuff.
In all the directions.
That is a danger of having a friend or a lover, a wife or a husband who's an embodiment person, isn't there? Is that on the one hand, it's great because when something comes up, you can go, oh, maybe I'm projecting some shadow here. And I was off center there, honey. I'm really sorry. And, you have that awareness, right? But on the other hand, it's a fucking nightmare. Like I was married to I wasn't married, but I had a partner who was a 5 rhythms teacher / therapist, and like any little thing we just go into so much depth on.
Yeah.
And that's a real danger of having a partner who's also a sort of embodiment type person, right?
Yeah, it's like sometimes you just got to choose your battles. It's like, I just don't want to hear it right now.
We call each other OB1 and OB2.
Yeah. If I say something,
it's like, you know what? I don't need OB1 right now. Thank you.
Just my wife.
Can I have my...
Sometimes the washing up's just the washing up and not a deep transaction issue, right?
It's actually a very good distinction to have. Like, I want my wife now, or I want my business partner now, or my co-philosopher now. But listen, it's not for everyone. We both had a stated ambition from many years before we even met each other. They wanted to find someone to go as deep as possible with each other and as fast as possible. It's not just the depth of the work, it's the speed at which the transformation can occur.
Well, an embodied relationship and, having a growth relationship rather than simply a transactional relationship, I think there's an important distinction there. And I'm certainly not interested in being in a relationship which isn't some kind of a growth relationship.
Absolutely.
But there's also hats, isn't there? I have one guy who's a good friend, he's a student, he's a business partner, and it's like, okay, which hat are we got on right now? Am I talking to my student, my colleague, or my friend? If you add love, we're not lovers, but if you added that, and it's another level. I'm like, dude, I'm glad I don't want to fuck you, because that would be even more levels. So it's like being clear on the hats and sometimes not being transformational, right? Like sometimes let's just watch Rick and Morty and fucking eat ice cream and hang out. Sometimes we can't. That's okay.
Exactly. Get the popcorn in. And let's not talk about ourselves, our relationship, or our work for at least 2 hours.
That's the danger, right? If you work together, it becomes all you can talk about.
Yeah.
The kids help.
The kids do help because they pull us out. They're like, we don't give a shit about how brilliant you think you are when you're going on stage. Right now, I need this from you. And we're like, okay.
I'm hungry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you put something in there, which is it's interesting to me right now, is the three of us go on some stages. You were talking about getting paid $6,000 to do a talk, or, like we're doing flying around the world. And, we're not sort of super big shots in this world, but we're both known. There's some established name, there's some reputation, there's some gigs that we get given. And like, how do you keep that from going to your head in terms of like not being a big shot? You mentioned your kids sort of saying, look, you're not on the stage now. I just need you to find my shoes.
Exactly.
I feel like we're people in this kind of mid-level of success. We're not,
I agree,
Tony Robbins type people who are massive rock stars, but we're not. And I guess a lot of people listening to this will be in a similar boat. They've got some reputation, they've had some success. Just because it's juicy for me, and I think listeners, let's talk about that middle stage of success. How does that work?
I love this chat because it's a very nuanced place. There aren't that many people there, right? Because you've done a lot of work, a lot of years have gone into getting head above the parapet, head above the sort of mass. So when I first started doing talks, I was being paid $1,000, $1,500, and then it's gone up, and I'm getting better gigs and whatever, and book deals and whatever. I guess from my personal point of view, I'm in some ways fortunate in that my pathway has involved me going from having absolutely no confidence in myself, with girls, with life, with work at Cambridge, all of it. So I still have a default protective pattern around I'm shit. No one thinks I'm great. So it's almost like I don't need so much the ego puncturing. It's more almost the opposite, which is I need to just enjoy having this middling level of success, as you call it. So that's for me probably more my very personal journey was healing a total lack, zero, like almost off the charts, zero confidence. And I think for a harder one for me is to want to be somewhere in the next echelon up than where I'm at.
It can start a grasping, can't it? There can be start that I'm like, hey, I get paid to teach embodiment. I haven't worried about the rent in years now.
Exactly.
That's amazing. And it's gratitude and not like, yeah, but I want to be them. And when's my book out? Or I want a TED gig, or I want to, the next kind of thing up. I think there's also something for me about it is nice to talk to other people in that place, especially in the UK. There's not very many. And I like it when I talk to like Samantha Mayo, who runs Morning Glory, who's, again, another person I put in this kind of category. When my dad died, she sent me some very sweet messages. Or like when I chat to Jamie Caddo, who we had on the show, or like other people who are sort of in that. There's not that many. I could probably count 6 or 7 that I know personally. But it's something quite nice about when I reach out and chat with those people.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that I've been sort of investing in is a global network of people who are sort of moving together in their own fields and own purpose. Just to have a moment to go, I'm really, just to be vulnerable and go, you know what, I'm really struggling with what to do with Instagram, or I really don't know if I should do a book with another publisher or do it on my own. Those kind of the questions that come up when you haven't got the level of success where everything is easy, everything comes to you.
Yeah.
You've still got a lot more opportunities than you ever had before, and choices to be made about where you invest your time and your energy and stuff. But working together, we puncture each other's bubbles, and
I mean, I don't know if it sounds cheesy, but I just look at it as being of service. It's like I am here to love, learn, and do that while I'm being of service to the world. And yes, we both want to scale this. So I do have that picture of wanting to reach as many people as possible. But that's it. That's how I want to be of service to as many people as possible.
Well,
it's a fun game.
Yeah, turning into a game's kind of fun, as you say, and there's different personalities in this, as well. I have a big ego, so there's things I might have to watch out for that you might not, Allison, and it's different personalities of the game. But, it's definitely that temptation of how that success can be like that next thing, right? And also the possible creation of a false self. Like I have to look good, like I was looking at my weight and eating and my food patterns. And I noticed it was like part of me didn't want to put it on Facebook when I was like, hey, I'm looking for some help for this. I'm reaching out to people for this. Because it's like I'm supposed to be kind of together now. The embodiment teacher is fucking
Right.
he's emotional. Like it's
Right.
I think the bigger you get, the more there's this felt pressure of like, I'm not supposed, my marriage should be fucking perfect. My diet should be perfect. I should never be an asshole. And that can create this weird kind of false self for people, And
I think that's something that, having lived in California, and we've met each other in California, it's something that has definitely become part of the industry of this work. Is this back to that thing at the beginning? It's back to the athletic escape in many ways. It's an aesthetic escape and having to be perfect and having everything sorted. And that's the joy of this work, is there's always another breakthrough to have. There's always another trauma to heal. There's always another pattern that you didn't realize you had. And in fact, I think when you stop being vulnerable to that, that's when you get all the totally dysfunctional teachers who end up having people die and cultish weirdness, because that's when you become invincible and invulnerable, and then the growth can't happen. You can't grow when you're invincible.
I wonder if our culture isn't a little bit of defense by this. I talked to a movement medicine teacher from Ireland yesterday, and he had a similar perspective. Ireland, the UK have this slight cynicism of cults. And, I mean, I'm sure there are cults in Brighton and Lewis, but I'm pretty sure there's more in the deserts of California. I wonder if there isn't a slight cultural defense of and that has a negative side too, right? Like we have this British thing of who do you think you are? You
Absolutely.
Think you're better than everyone else? Like maybe sort of upper class people have it a bit less, from kind of Oxbridge background, it's almost expected to be successful. But where I come from, it's like, don't try and be better than everyone else. And I've noticed that every time I get a little step up in success, people try and knock me down from the
Oh God.
I think that's why people love California, because it's the opposite.
Yeah.
It's just like, what are you doing? What are you working on? Oh, that's amazing.
You go out there, Mark. Yeah. You go and do your embodiment.
Put air in your balloon rather than try and take it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it was only, to say something nice about California again, it was only the fact that I was, I started my business when I was in California. I was inspired by people I was there with. I was staying on a ranch, and everyone I was around was like a personal growth teacher or a lesbian sex therapist or whatever. Yeah. And I just went, and they were just like, you can do it. You can do it. There was this positive sense. And then I went back to the UK and I'm like, I'm starting a business. I just, I've got this idea. And all my mates who love me were like, what do you know about business? And that's not going to work. And how do you expect people to pay for that? And, in some ways they were trying to help me because they were trying to get me more grounded and realistic. But it almost discouraged me to the point where I didn't start that business years ago. I had a birthday party and they all kind of came, and I announced this is what I was doing with my life. And I just got sober. And I thought, fucking hell. And I had to be on the phone to my mentor in California at least once a month just to get like re-encouraged,
Get the air back.
There's a balance between the two.
Yes. I mean, when my first book came out, I was, promoting it online, and I really don't do much promoting. I'm so overly caring about being seen as too pushy and too cult leadery and whatever, evangelical. I actually do very little promotion, which is actually its own right a problem, because, if you're going to have a book and stuff, you've got to promote it. Otherwise no one knows anything about it. So I've gone through many, many journeys with that. But I remember one person literally, who I don't really know well, sent me a Facebook message saying, I really don't like the way you talk about yourself, like being a wisdom this or da-da-da. And I was like, wow, this is like the kind of, you get all this hammering down.
Yeah.
And I actually just read to Ali a quote from an article in the New Yorker I read this week, which is from the Gospels. And basically says, I can't remember the whole thing from the Gospels, but it basically says, when Jesus first started preaching, everyone was like, who the hell, isn't he just the carpenter?
The carpenter from Nazareth.
Yeah, well, what does he know? And so there is something about being able to play at, if your friends don't think you're uncle and you think your spiritual stuff sounds so weird and lame, whatever, just going to have to, we're not doing it for them.
Yeah. And as you say, there's probably a balance between the two. And definitely embodiment wise, I know a lot of British people have trouble taking space, making offers. There's a whole body of being seen and putting themselves out there. I had a friend, Peter, who went to Eton, and he hasn't got that. And I used to resent that. And then I went, you know what? Actually, that's amazing. Good for you. You're able to be big and put yourself out there because you were encouraged when you were a kid. That's fantastic. So it's like I kind of get that now. And I've had to kind of really struggle with that. But I see it getting there and trying to find that line between not getting too cheesy and off the wall, but keeping it real at the same time. So yeah, I can see how that would work with you two as a balance. That could be a beautiful combo.
We're still working at it.
So any final messages from either of you about the body? Are they kissing? This is so cute. I love a romance on the show. I'm such a sucker for romance. So any message, with or without kissing, about the body for listeners? Anything you want, guys. Open floor, go.
About the body. Oh my God, I would say start loving your body and accepting it as it is in this moment.
Yeah, something I always think to myself is, if I don't love my body as much as the sunrise in Ibiza or the sunset in Goa, then I don't love the universe. And so therefore that's a real intense chat to myself, who comes with a body image issues from the past. And my one is more around in every second of your life. Right now, as you listen to this, your body will have a whole spectrum of sensations. And the more you can experience them and feel them and listen to them and follow the ones that are curious and interesting, the more your body will take you where it knows you can go without a guru, because the guru is already there and it's in the sensations, the micro moment sensations of, oh, my toe feels a bit tingly, or oh, I'm feeling a bit dizzy, disoriented, and just to be able to, rather than slam them down with intellect, or even words, therapy, coaching, just stay with the actual sensation. And it's amazing. It's magical.
I think a good way to get into that is to start talking to your body. Like literally just lay in bed and ask, do I love my body? Because we're so cerebral about it. It's like until you actually get into some sort of experience and start listening to your body, then the stuff comes up. And it's like, even if you think, oh, well, I love my body. I have a great body. I work out, but just laying there and going, do I love my body? Do I hate my body? And just see what kind of emotions and stuff come up.
Thank you both. Thank you both very much. And I know people can find out more about you on the switchonnow.com. Have I said that right? Switchonnow.com.
Yeah.
And you get stuff on YouTube, any other kind of resources or things you want to point people to. This might be a few weeks after this goes live, just to bear in mind if you've got any live stuff.
Well, switchonnow.com/inspiration. There's a whole bunch of free stuff. There's free meditations we've recorded, free toolkits, free guides, all sorts of stuff that we've created along the way, which we don't sell anymore or did once. And then we've got stuff coming out. We've got a new book, Spiritual Atheist, coming out in 2018. Says what it does on the tin, I think. And then we've got the Switch On Experience, which is our version of a ecstatic, transformational 3-day workshop without any of the naughties,
which we're running around the world in various places.
Great. Well, this has felt bright and fun. Yeah. And a really, really great dialogue, which doesn't always work with three people that I feel I had today. So guys, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Take care.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to get more. If you'd like to help us build the Embodied Tribe, leave a review on iTunes or share this on your social media. If you're interested in training globally, sign up to receive the newsletter at embodiedfacilitator.com. Until next time, welcome home to the body.